Welcome back, everybody. Take a break for Stephen Shamus.
Good to see you, my friend. How are you tonight?
Wonderful. Pleasure. Wonderful. Everything's great. It's a good day.
Right. It seems like everything's calming down a little bit.
Yes.
Everything is getting back to normal.
So I got my first shot.
All good, my friend.
I'm halfway there. Yep.
I did too.
Yeah. Okay, halfway cool. There.
We're like twins.
Yeah.
All right. What are we talking about this week, Alex?
Yeah. Let's dive in some different things. We'll talk a little Usagi Yojimbo.
My name is Usagi Yojimbo.
That means rabbit bodyguard.
I am a Ronin, a masterless samurai.
He's not only from medieval Japan, but also from an alternate universe. So naturally, he speaks English.
We're going to talk a little Robins.
I was talking to the other Robin, the one who did all the work.
Thanks. Glad someone sees who the real hero is here.
Not you, Robin. The best Robin. The one with the smooth, hairless legs.
Thank you. Guys, I'm Robin Classic, the best.
Mm-hmm. Two of my favorite, Tim and Jason. And then we're going to jump on to Darkhawk. Everybody's favorite 90s character.
Yeah, it's interesting, right? I mean, that's a character that's definitely caused a lot of controversy, positive and negative, where people are sort of making fun of it. It is interesting how every week we try to do the show, try to do something a little different, and then just things always pop up and new shows get announced and new this and new that. I'm sure Winter Soldier, we're gonna have a whole bunch to talk about there as the show progresses.
Yep.
You've already seen the prices escalate like crazy. I mean, I remember that US Agent book was $300 to $400 a few months ago. It's like $3,000 now. I mean, Alex, it's just off the wall. You know what it is? You have low pop books from 25, 30 years ago. And even when people go dig them out, you know, you might pull out a 9.0 or 9.2 or 9.4, but you're not necessarily pulling out a 9.8.
Nope.
Right?
Nope.
Right? So, okay. All right, great. What do we got first, Alex?
Yeah, let's talk about Usagi Yojimbo.
Interesting character, right? We have a new Netflix animated series coming out.
Yep, finally, after years and years.
It's definitely a character that, like, if you're a comic book fan, like, you know Usagi Yojimbo, right? Yeah. It's just a character that's always been around. It's a character that people have always talked about. Stan has always been a popular guest at the shows.
Definitely.
It's a character that people always knew and liked. And you're right. You're like 1984. Like, it's been a while, right? Like who would have thought 37 years would have taken?
I mean, it's
for that.
Came out the same time as the Ninja Turtles. Like, this is the same era.
Yeah, it's the same era, and it's one of those things where it's like, with all the new Image titles and series and everything else getting picked up, you would have thought that somewhere along the way, this title would have gotten picked up. Talk a little bit about the character Usagi Yojimbo before we get into all the different books.
Yeah, so Usagi Yojimbo is a character created by Stan Sakai. He writes and draws it, and it's just a story about a samurai rabbit who goes around Japan and is kind of like, just a samurai. So he sells himself as a bodyguard. There's no main story for Usagi, which is great for people that just want to pick it up. You can just pick up a book and read it. There is some overlying story arcs, but a lot of each issue is just a different little tale. It's the traveling, Ronin type of character. And, it's been around forever. There was a Ninja Turtle action figure made from him. This character has been, won many awards. Like I said, Stan Sakai writes and draws it all. He's been doing it since the 80s. It's just one of those great comic books.
All right, so Alex, let's dive right in. 37 years ago, June of 1984, Albedo #1. There are 0 Blue Label 9.8s, 0 Gold Label 9.8s. There are 4 Blue Label 9.6s. There are 0 Gold Label 9.6s. The last 9.4 sold for $15,000. It's a super duper, super rare book. It was published under Thoughts and Images. It has a prototype of Usagi Yojimbo by Stan Sakai, and very, very rare book. I mean, you don't even see them. You don't see them raw.
Talk about independent books. I mean, this was like an independent super book. Yeah.
Right, very low print run.
Yes.
Then you had the second print of Albedo #1 was produced 3 months later. Again, still there are 2 blue label 9.8s, 0 gold label 9.8s. There are 5 blue label 9.6s, 0 gold label 9.6s. A book like that will sell for about $400 in 9.0. The way you could tell the difference is it has a bright red cover ink. So it was reprinted a few months later. It is interesting because when you do look at the Ninja Turtles, the second prints did sell for a lot more money. This book is just as rare in the second print as it is in the first one. You would think that would be a lot more, but whatever. Okay, then you have Albedo #2, November of 1984. That is the first appearance of Usagi Yojimbo.
Yes.
Interestingly enough, there's letters from Peter Laird, co-creator of the Ninja Turtles, which you just brought up before. It does have a Stan Sakai cover and art. There are 12 blue label 9.8s. There are 3 gold label 9.8s. That is a wow. 17 blue label 9.6s, 7 gold label 9.6s. The last 9.8 sold for $15,000. So that again is a very, very rare book. Then the next couple of books that we want to talk about are just like they have great covers or great cover art or just special things about them. Albedo #3, April of 1985. There are 13 blue label 9.8s. There are 4 gold label 9.8s. There are 25 blue label 9.6s. There are 4 gold label 9.6s. That's about a $1,500 book. There's a back cover pinup by Stan Sakai. That's the second appearance of Usagi Yojimbo. And the third appearance of Usagi Yojimbo, which he's actually on the cover for only the second time. So he was not on the cover of the prior issue, July of 1985. There are 11 blue label 9.8s. There's 1 gold label 9.8. There are 21 blue label 9.6s. There are 4 gold label 9.6s. That's about a $1,500 book. That one seems very reasonable to have the second Usagi cover. It's also a pretty memorable cover too. It's a pretty nice cover as well. Then the other two issues that you really need to talk about are the Usagi Yojimbo Summer Special from October of '86. There are 15 blue label 9.8s. There are 4 gold label 9.8s. There are 11 blue label 9.6s, 4 gold label 9.6s. That's about a $400 book in 9.6. It's about a $300 raw book. It's a very, very difficult book to find. There's also a pinup by Sergio Aragones. You know, back in the '80s, him and Sergio, Gru the Warrior, would always do shows together. There was something simpatico with the two of them, with Gru and with Usagi Yojimbo. They even did some crossovers over the years. So they were like BFFs back before it was like even cool to be a BFF, I think. Right?
True.
And then of course Usagi Yojimbo #1, the first standalone title, July of 1987. There are 93 blue label 9.8s. There are 21 gold label 9.8s. There are actually 111 blue label 9.6s. There are 26 gold label 9.6s. That's about a $2,000 book in 9.8. It's about a $500 book in 9.6. That's a good one to pick up.
Totally.
It's the first one published by Fantagraphics. It's his first Usagi Yojimbo in his own title. There was also a second print. There's only 1 blue, 1 gold 9.8, and those are about $75 to $100 raw. So really, if you can afford it, you try to get the Albedo books in maybe a lower grade if you can find them, which you can't, or the Usagi Yojimbo #1. By 1987, the character did pick up, and that was 3 years after the fact.
Still putting out today.
Right. All right, Alex, what do we got next?
Let's jump into the duo part of the dynamic duo, Robins.
Right. So we'll start with the first the Robin that we were familiar with in the 1980s, and that was Jason Todd. And there's a few Robins over the years. Today, we're going to talk about Jason and Tim, not Damian. We'll get to Damian on another show. For whatever reason recently, and you'll talk about this more in a minute, the Tim Drake version is flying. But let's address the Jason Todd one, because there are certain books of the Jason Todd one that are very, very popular right now and hot. So talk a little bit about Jason Todd, his role of becoming Robin, you know, sometime in the early 80s. And then he was Robin up really through the late 80s. And then we saw him come back as the Red Hood. And I'll let you talk about that.
Yeah. So Jason Todd, Famously was the second Robin. Batman found him as he was trying to steal the tires off the Batmobile, which is hilarious.
That's how I found you, by the way.
That's right. Yeah. The poor Ace Mobile. I was lifting the tires off of it.
That's how that's a very similar story. Who would have thought?
It's my origin story. I'm
origin
just like Chase and Todd.
That's your origin story. I like that.
That's it. I'm gonna draw that comic. Jason Todd was a Robin. He was the second Robin. He was a hothead, and that came all into fruition in the Death in the Family series of how much of a hothead or how much he did not enjoy being told what to do. Compared to Tim Drake, who was very cool, very like-minded. When you think of like the Tim Drake and Jason Todd is the violence of Batman, where Tim Drake is the detective of Batman. Two very different characteristics.
Got it. Okay, so let's examine Jason Todd in Batman 357 from March of '83. There are 226 blue label 9.8s, 5 gold label 9.8s. That's about a $1,400 book, Alex. It's also about a $400 book in 9.6 because it also has the first appearance of Killer Croc, who is in the Suicide Squad. So there is both elements there. Talk a little. By the way, what is good about that particular cover is it's actually a really memorable cover too. It's actually a very good cover of them. Yeah. How does he become? So who was the Robin right before him, and then Batman? Like, how did that switch take place?
Yeah, so Dick Grayson was the Robin before him, if anybody didn't know. And then Dick Grayson, just like all children, grew up and became Nightwing and forged his own path. So Batman didn't have a Robin for a very long time. And this was him, and you can see it in the two books where Batman finds Jason, trains him, and takes him. Where Batman's like, "Oh yeah, you'd be a great Robin. I need a Robin. This is great." And then when Tim Drake comes along, after Jason Todd dies, spoilers, but I'm sure everybody knows it by now.
33 years later, spoilers.
Yeah.
It's okay.
When Jason Todd dies, Batman's like, "I will never put anybody in harm again." He kind of cuts ties with the whole Bat family. And Tim Drake's no, Batman needs a Robin because you need to be grounded. And then Jason Todd does eventually come back as Red Hood. And I think this is why these prices are going higher. When Jason Todd was dead for years until Batman Hush, I wouldn't say nobody cared, but the character wasn't as popular. Now he's back, and he's been back for a very long time as a character, Red Hood, and he is a very popular character.
Got it. So that Batman 357, there's also a Canadian price variant. These Canadian price variants are very, very rare. We've talked about them before. There are 3 blue label 9.8s. There's 0 gold label 9.8s. That Canadian variant sells for about $135 to $150 raw.
Yeah.
And then there's something called a pre-pack edition, Alex. What is the pre-pack edition?
So during the time there was DC was packing comics for Walgreens, like pharmacy stores, and we've seen this for a long time. G.I. Joe second prints were in pre-packs. Secret Wars second prints and third prints were in pre-packs. It was Batman, World's Finest, and one other book, and they specially printed these comics to be put in 3 comics in a pack, and this sold Walgreens. This one doesn't have the month on the cover, so you can tell it is a pre-pack. It was specifically made for those packs.
It's crazy rare, by the way. I haven't even seen one.
Extremely rare. Yeah,
crazy. Like if you get one, just it doesn't even really matter what condition it is. There's no pop.
I saw a 2.5 sold a very long ago. A 2.5. That's extremely low. That's a $2 comic. Like, it's nothing.
That's your dog ate it.
Exactly. So right. I mean, if they're grading 2.5s, that just shows you how rare these are.
Yeah, super duper rare. If you can find one, I don't even know how you'd find one.
Yeah,
but that's a good point. It's missing the month, you said.
Yep.
Good. Got it. All right, great. Then you've got Batman 366, December of '83. There are 164 blue label 9.8s. There's 14 gold label 9.8s. That's about a $350 book. Again, there's a Canadian price variant. Only 1 blue label 9.8, 0 gold labels, $100 to $125 raw. That's his first appearance in the Robin costume.
Yep.
There's also the Joker appearance. By the way, that Walt Simonson cover is one of my favorite
rare Walt Simonson DC covers. Yeah.
True, right? Like, everyone knows him as Thor. You didn't real. I'll tell you, you're correct. As I was doing the research, I was like, you're right. Walt Simonson working for DC, correct? what a phenomenal perspective that he took for that cover. One of my favorite Batman covers. And you're right. I didn't even realize that Walt Simonson, all these years, for some reason, I had it in my head that Neil Adams did that cover. I don't know why.
I mean,
I got it.
9 times out of 10, if you say, "Hey, who did that cover?" and you say Neil Adams, you're probably not going to be correct.
Right. And but that is an amazing, amazing cover.
Yeah.
So I love that book at $350. I love it. Okay. Then Batman 368. In February of 1984, there are 293 Blue Label 9.8s. There are 13 Gold Label 9.8s. That's about $175 to $200 book. He officially becomes the second Robin. Talk a little bit about like when that means he officially becomes the second Robin. What does that mean?
It means it's okayed by Batman, and you'll see this in a couple times with the Tim Drake. You'll see it a couple times with the Damian stuff. A lot of times when Batman is training these guys, he's never sure that they're ready to become Robin, or he doesn't want them to become, but teenage kids are going to forge their own path. So this is when they were just like, okay, you're the Robin now.
Got it. Okay. And then of course, again, there's a Canadian price variant. There's 8 Blue Label 9.8s. There's 0 Gold Label 9.8s. It's a $75 to $100 raw book. And then that brings us to one of the most important books of the 1980s, probably one of the most important books of all time. And I have to tell you, I don't know if I sold more copies of this book or The Death of Superman in the shop.
Yeah.
And this was Batman 428, December of 1988. This was a seminal moment in comic books. And for the sheer volume of number of books printed.
Yeah.
Because it was a heavy, heavy print run.
Oh, yeah. That was a big one.
December of 88, 177 Blue Label 9.8s, only 18 Gold Label 9.8s.
That's very low.
That book has been on the rise, deceptively low, black cover, chips easily.
Yep.
Get a color break, color breaks, can't get 9.8s.
Yep.
Can't press it out, can't clean it out. Color breaks, 9.6, end the story. It's about a $600 book. I think, who would have thunk with all the, and remember, those books were put in bags and boards all
right
of them.
away. Yes. Yeah.
Right away. That was not a book that lingered on the newsstands. Okay. Death in the Family, Death of Robin, the Mike Mignola classic cover, probably Mike Mignola's most famous cover, even though people know him for Hellboy. I don't know that there's a more iconic, memorable Mike Mignola image than that bloody Robin cover.
Yeah.
What he did on that set of 4 was unbelievable. Mike Mignola, that was his best work as far as I'm concerned.
Agreed.
I don't know that Mike Mignola had better work. And just talk about the cultural impact. I was working in the shop at the time. Talk about the cultural impact. You were probably a kid. You probably bought it at your comic shop, no?
Yeah, this is just like you said with Death of Superman. This was a big deal. I mean, we can go into, they had an 800 number that you could call and vote to see if Robin should be alive, which there's pages of that. And I think in the hardcover, they actually give you the pages of the surviving Robin. But that was a big deal. And look at everybody on the book. It's Jim Starlin writing. I mean, that's huge on its own. Jim Starlin is known now for his Thanos and space stuff, but I mean, this was one of his best works. Jim Aparo and Mike DiCarlo. I mean, Jim Aparo as a Batman artist is probably top 10 for a lot of people. A lot of people like him for the Spectre, but I mean, his Batman, he did Batman very well and did it for a long time. And then the Mike Mignola covers. I mean, this was Mike Mignola before he was Hellboy's Mike Mignola. You know, this book is culturally for the comic book community is huge.
Yeah, I think when you even look at other industries, when they say like, what are the key books, right?
Yeah.
What are the key books? And you say, okay, Spider-Man 300, and you talk about these other kinds of books. I'm talking about modern era where people can actually jump in and afford them. You would think that with a pop this low, that the book would actually be more expensive.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I think people have this perception that there's a lot of them.
There are a lot of copies out there, but they're not a lot of 9/8s. There's a difference. There's a huge difference. Where Amazing Fantasy 15, you don't care if you get a 0.5 or a 9/8, just having a copy is a big deal. People, these are modern books, so they want a 9/8. There's a lot of copies out there, but not a lot of 9/8s.
177. I mean, Alex,
that's extremely low
for a book from 1988 that they printed millions of copies of.
Yeah. I think there's more first appearance of Vision's 9.8s, or just about the same amount.
Right. It's funny, right?
Yeah.
Okay, and then the last book to talk about, which you touched on earlier, is The Red Hood.
Yeah.
Batman 635, February of 2005, 17 years later, Jim Lee, that was the big reveal, we all remember. It's a $400 to $450 book. There's 631 blue label 9.8s, 47 gold label 9.8s. So think about this. There's 177 Batman 428 9.8s.
Yep.
There's 631 Batman 635 9.8s.
Yeah.
17 years later, that book is $400 to $450.
Yeah.
And the Batman 428 is $600.
Bananas.
Doesn't make any sense.
It doesn't.
And I think there is a perception that there's just a lot of copies out there, which there is.
Yeah, and this Batman series was right after Hush. The Judd Winnick took over right after Hush ended. So there's a lot of books out there. I mean, that Matt Wagner cover is also beautiful. I love Matt Wagner's covers. It's a good book to have.
Yes, the Grendel, that was his
Green Arrow covers.
Yeah,
amazing.
His work is great. So that was the first Jason Todd as the Red Hood. Then you had the Mr. Freeze and Black Mask appearance. Judd Winnick, obviously famous from MTV. So talk a little bit about the Red Hood character and what that character is and why all of a sudden there's a lot of interest in that Red Hood character.
Yeah, I mean, he was kind of a MacGuffin in the Jim Lee Hush stuff. He came, Jason Todd was back. Batman was like, oh my gosh, what's this? And then it turns out to be Clayface. But then the fans' reaction was so crazy for it, they actually brought him back as Red Hood. You know, he survived. He Ra's al Ghul's pit brought him back full health. He trained himself. He was out, and now he's a vigilante. And he's kind of he still wants to do good, but he's not afraid to use guns and kill. And that's kind of like what Batman is definitely against. He's against guns. He's against killing. And Red Hood's not afraid to do that. And to have Jason Todd back, where he is the in-between between Tim Drake and Dick Grayson, is the dynamic of that family is just like, you know, they all failed. They all failed him. Batman failed him. Joker killed him. And now he's back. And it's like they want to be close to him, but he knows what he wants to do. And he's trying to do good and trying to keep that same line, but it's tough. The character's great. I mean, Under the Red Hood, the animated movie was really good. You know, you're probably going to see him in the Titans show. There's Jason Todd is a Robin in the first 2 seasons of Titans. Looks like he's going to be Red Hood in the 3rd season, which is going to be awesome, and it's going to drive those books a little bit higher, I think, too.
Right. Okay. Great. All right, Alex. Before we touch on our buddy Tim Drake,
my favorite
second Robin, Alex's pick of the week. What do you got for us?
We always talk about CGC, and I a lot of times talk about toys. Well, did you know that there's a CGC for toys? AFA Grading, yeah. AFA Grading, and there's a couple other places out there that don't grade, but they'll encapsulate your toys. But AFA Grading is encapsulation for toys, and I love it as more of a, not necessarily, I don't need a perfect copy of a Ghostbusters toy from the 80s. I want to preserve it, and these acrylic boxes are specially made for each toy, and they preserve them. You know, they're in there. They're in a good, safe, airtight seal, and they're in this case, and you can still put them out. You know, putting a pegged action figure in this box lets the box stand up on its own, so you can display all your figures on a bookshelf or something like that. I love it. I think it's very underrated as a preservation, more so than just getting, you know, the highest graded Ghostbuster or Ninja Turtle toy. But you know, if you have toys out there that you really love, you know, even modern stuff, I mean, it's just nice to get them in these boxes, to get them preserved and looking good. I'm a big fan of the AFA stuff.
So which one do you have?
I have 2 Star Wars animated, and then my favorite is the San Diego Comic-Con Plastic Man. I got the AFA graded.
All right, make sure we show it to the fans.
Of course, of course. Okay. I love showing it off.
All right, great. Now, the next one, which we have to talk about, is Tim Drake.
Yes.
This guy is on fire, and
Yes.
you got to tell me what's going on, because my eyes almost exploded out of my head. Because remember, Batman was always one of the best-selling titles.
Yeah.
Batman back in the 1980s and 1990s was always at the top of the list,
Always.
and they were selling a lot more issues back then. So it's not like these issues are hard to find, right? They may be hard to find in 9.8s, but these books have gone absolutely bananas. So let's talk about. I'm gonna give you his first appearance, and then you got to talk about Tim Drake and what is going on with this. So Tim Drake's first appearance is Batman 436, August of 1989. 108 Blue Label 9.8s, 8 Gold Label 9.8s. I don't know why the pop is so low. They definitely printed a decent number of these. Maybe they're just been tossed around in dollar bins for all these years.
Probably right. Yep.
It's about a $475 book, which is absolutely phenomenal to me. Tells the origin of Robin, Dick Grayson retold, and it's the first appearance of Tim Drake. So obviously there must have been some passing of the torch there. It's a Marv Wolfman story, obviously, and of course the great George Perez cover. So talk a little bit about Tim Drake and why is this book on fire, Alex?
Perfect. It's a perfect example of my generation. My generation did not grow up with Jason Todd. They grew up with Tim Drake. Tim Drake has been a Robin since the 90s and has been for, we're talking almost 30 years. I mean, now Robin is Damian Wayne, which is Bruce Wayne's son. But Tim Drake's not out of the DC universe. He didn't die. They didn't write him off. He didn't retire. He's still around. He was Red Robin. He was Drake. He still calls himself Robin sometimes. This character is just one that's been around for so long. People just love. It's the same as with Nightwing and Dick Grayson. You couldn't get rid of Dick Grayson and kill him off because he was the Robin for so many years. Teen Titans. Then he became Nightwing, and now he's his own character. And Tim Drake's just a loved character. And his Robin series ran for I think almost 60 issues. And I think the only reason why they got rid of that title was that they were just changing the DC universe. They were making Tim Drake be part of the Young Justice team, and everybody just moves along, and that's how natural progression works. But for someone to have 160 to almost 200 issue run, you can't just kill them off, right? So this is my generation's Robin, and we won his first appearance.
Yeah, it's crazy. I mean, I couldn't believe it. Look, I would understand, $100, $150, but I guess it's because of the low pop. But I do think you're going to start to see the pop fill out a little bit. There's a second print with a green bullet logo, which is impossible to find. Raw, any other. 3 Blue Label 9.8s, 0 Gold Label 9.8s. The last one sold for $900. Even raw, that book is $35. You cannot find that. Again, we've talked about it. Back in the day, the second prints weren't like they are now with different covers and everything. Right. People probably like green label, blue label. They didn't even look at it. They just like threw it in the dollar box. I mean, and they weren't ordered like that back then. They just weren't. So if you get a green bullet logo second print, pick it up, because in any grade, because you just literally can't find them.
Yep.
Okay, then the next book is Batman 442, 6 issues later, December of 1989. It's the first Tim Drake in the Robin costume. That definitely has a higher pop. 367 Blue Label 9.8s, 117 Gold Label 9.8s. What's strange to me is that you would think that a book that was printed back in 1989, a few months later, why the pop is so much higher makes no sense. Why people have the 442s but not the 436s. That doesn't make any sense. But anyway, that book is only $75 to $100, probably because of the pop on it.
Right.
It's the first appearance of Tim Drake in the Robin costume. Again, another George Perez cover. So again, you just have him in the Robin costume in that particular issue.
Yep.
And then in Batman 457, 1 year later, December 1990, going back to your original statement earlier, 293 Blue Label 9.8s, 10 Gold Label 9.8s, first Tim Drake as Robin, $150. This is considered the first Tim Drake as Robin. So I guess Robin costume as Robin, you're saying Batman officially recognizes it.
Yeah. So the interesting thing about Tim Drake is Batman didn't find Tim Drake. Tim Drake had a mother and father. Tim Drake was well off. His dad was also another wealthy man, not as wealthy as Bruce Wayne. There was no tragic backstory. Tim Drake figured out who Batman was. Tim Drake figured out that the two Robins that you'd seen throughout the years were two different people. Tim Drake also figured out that Batman was getting more violent, and he knew that someone needed to get to him and tell him, you need a Robin to balance you out. So the fact that Tim Drake was around for almost a year and a half before he became Robin is because Batman didn't want him to become Robin. Tim Drake is the one that wanted to, and you see him in a old Robin costume in 442 is because he had to save Batman from a villain, and he just grabbed the costume, went out and saved him. After that, after a year later, Batman finally folds and goes, okay, you can become Robin. So he gets his own costume and his own stuff, his own series.
Right. That's great. And then there was a second print across the top. It says New Robin issue.
Yep.
That's the only difference. There's 24 blue label 9.8s. There's 0 gold label 9.8s. That's only a $200 book in 9.8, but that one is 10 times rarer than the first print.
Yep.
So I would try to pick one of those up raw. And then super duper, super rare.
Yeah.
Is there's a second print newsstand, 2 blue label 9.8s, 0 gold label 9.8s. That book sells for $1,500 to $2,000 in an 8.5. You cannot find the second print newsstand raw.
I'll take 2.
Anything. I know it's funny, right? You start to look back, you try to start to differentiate. You can't find these things. It's absolutely phenomenal. All right, what are we closing out with tonight, Alex?
The 90s collectible baby Darkhawk.
Yeah, I don't know what stirs more controversy in the comic marketplace when you're talking about 1990s characters than when you bring up Dark Horse, right? Like half the people think Darkhawk, forget it. The other people love Darkhawk. I don't know. This book just continues to climb.
Yeah.
Interestingly enough, Marvel Age number 97. Those Marvel Ages are impossible to find. You literally can't find them. He's on the cover, and like I didn't even know that book existed until I started doing the research. You cannot find Marvel Age 97. You can't find them. Again, those were kind of thrown out usually. Those were like the Marvel catalogs almost.
Yeah, it's just like the comic shop newses. It was they weren't free, but it was just a news magazine in comic form. I mean, we'd put them in dollar boxes. I mean, people don't want to spend the $4, a piece for them, what regular modern comics go for it. But they all do have first appearances in them.
Yeah, I think we threw them out actually.
So that came out in February of 1991. There are 30 blue label 9.8s. There's 2 gold label 9.8s. That's about a $600 book in 9.8, which is probably a pretty good price.
Yeah,
because he's on the cover. He's not in the book. He's on the cover. It's a $200 book in 9.6. It's about an $80 raw book. Talk a little bit about the Darkhawk character. What is it that creates such controversy on both sides? And what is the character? Who is the character? Why does it create such division? And why is it so popular, right? Because they create a lot of characters in the 1980s.
Yeah. Darkhawk ran for a very long time. It ran for many years. Darkhawk was Christopher Powell, who found, it's just like classic 90s comics. He finds an amulet, and the amulet transforms his body to null space, where then his mind is in a cyborg type of machine, organic machine's body, and then that machine has like Wolverine claws, and he can fly, and he's got like the Iron Man blasting from his chest. Like he's got a little bit of everything. He kind of looks like a metal Batman. He's been in the Marvel Universe forever. He was part of the New Warriors. When you talk about Darkhawk, you have to think about New Warriors like Nova and Justice and Speedball, and it's just like very 90s, very of the times. Super fan favorite, especially for collectors, especially again, just like Tim Drake, my era collectors, where this is what they grew up. This is, they bought the first issue off the newsstand. He wasn't in Amazing Spider-Man annual number 15. First appearance was number 1 issue, and just people love him. And yes, I think the nostalgia affects the price here.
Yeah. Well, what's interesting is Darkhawk number 1, which came out a month later, March of 1991. There's actually 677 blue label 9.8s.
It's
34
bananas.
gold label 9.8s. So there's a lot in the pop, and that's a $325 book, even with that high pop. So there's definitely a lot of interest there. Interestingly enough, first appearance in Origin of Darkhawk. There's a Hobgoblin appearance. Mike Manley cover and art. It's a great cover. It's kind of a cool cover. It's a very 90s cover.
Super 90s.
Like you look at it, you're like, oh yeah, that was drawn in the 1990s. Like you know that, right? Like that's kind of obvious.
Yeah. So anyway, I think if you're going to pick up anything Marvel Age, that book continues to climb, Darkhawk. Alex gave you the reasons. We'll see if Marvel does anything in the universe and
they might
at all. It'll go crazy like everything else.
Yeah, that's a good tip. Start picking up Marvel Ages, because now you're starting to see people be like, hey, first black costume Spider-Man, one of the first appearances is in a Marvel Age book. I think it predates it maybe like a week or the same time.
I know, we discussed that. We discussed
yeah,
that.
Yeah. So,
show.
I mean, it's not a bad idea to start picking up runs of Marvel Age and try to grade them out, press them out.
Just press them out. That's funny. All right, Alex, that brings us to the conclusion.
Yes.
It was another great show. Thank you very much. And if you have any questions or comments, leave it in the field, and we'll address it at some future. We have a lot of great shows coming up. So thank you, everybody, and we'll see you next week. Same bad time,
same bad channel. Have a good one, guys.